Hello, I'm Officer Aaron Super, and I would like to tell you about Sergeant William Lewis. Tragedy struck the Torrance Police Department on Sunday, August 23rd, 1959, when we lost our first officer in the line of duty. Motor Sergeant William Lewis was killed while attempting to stop a traffic violator. He was struck by a vehicle in the intersection of Hawthorne Boulevard and Carson Street, which had no traffic signals at the time. Sergeant Lewis was appointed as a police officer with the Torrance Police Department on October 3rd, 1949. He resurrected the department's motorcycle squad in 1954 on motorcycles personally owned by the officers and leased to the department for traffic enforcement. Sergeant Lewis was promoted to the rank of sergeant on July 1st, 1957. I would also like to share a letter about a childhood memory from Sergeant Lewis's daughter, Lorraine. I remember my dad shining his brass buttons and badge and always making sure his boots were polished. I can't help but look at a policeman's boots to this day to see if he keeps them looking good. My dad was proud of his job and the way he wore his uniform. Thank you, and thank the Torrance Police Department for keeping the memory of our fallen officers alive. Behind their families are the stories of the difficult days of loss and the memories they hold dear to their hearts. Sergeant Lewis was buried at Green Hills Memorial Park in San Pedro on August 27, 1959. A total of 102 motorcycle officers from LA County agencies, as well as the California Highway Patrol, attended the services. Sergeant William Lewis, you will never be forgotten.
Hello, I'm Eric Bernier, and I would like to tell you about Officer David Siebert. The Torrance Police Department tragically lost our second officer in the line of duty on Thursday, August 10, 1967. Officer Siebert had responded to a silent robbery alarm at the Foods Company Market on Crenshaw at 9:25 in the morning. Unbeknownst to him, an escaped convict was still inside the store committing an armed robbery. Officer Siebert entered the market and was confronted by the suspect who shot him. The suspect fled, but thankfully was captured 2 weeks later near Salt Lake City, Utah on February 22nd, 1968. A jury found the suspect guilty of first-degree murder of Officer David Siebert. Officer Siebert was hired by the Torrance Police Department on April 1st, 1965. A colleague recalls his friend Dave as someone who was always looking around to see if he could help people. Officer Siebert was buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery on August 14th, 1967. Officer David Siebert, you'll never be forgotten.
Hello, I'm Officer Morielli, and I would like to tell you about Detective Gary Ripstine. The Torrance Police Department lost our third officer in the line of duty when Detective Gary Ripstine was shot by an auto theft suspect on September 21st, on Saturday, December 21st, 1968. At approximately 10:25 in the morning, Detective Ripstine and his partner, Detective Holmes, attempted to arrest a suspect at his apartment in the 600 block of 8th Street in the city of Hermosa Beach. The detectives were invited inside the apartment by the suspect's wife, but upon entering the bedroom, were fired upon by the suspect. Detective Ripstine was struck 1 time. Detective Holmes and Hermosa officers returned fire, killing the suspect. Detective Ripstine was rushed to the hospital where he later succumbed to his injury on Sunday, December 22nd, 1968. Detective Ripstine was hired by the Torrance Police Department in April 1962. In addition to positions in patrol, detectives, and services, Officer Ripstine, an ordained minister, was appointed to a newly created position as the department's very first police chaplain. Officer Ripstine was buried at Green Hills Memorial Park in San Pedro on December 27, 1968. Officer Gary Ripstine, you will never be forgotten.
Hello, I'm Joe Kraft. I'd like to tell you about Thomas Keller. The fourth and last officer we've lost in the line of duty was Officer Tom Keller. He was shot on Thursday, April 17, 1986, while responding to an armed robbery call in the downtown Torrance area. The suspect had entered the Torrance Sports Shop at 1421 Marcelina Avenue, displaying a handgun at approximately 3:45 in the afternoon. Employees and customers were able to flee the store and call police. Unbeknownst to officers, the suspect had armed himself with an M1 carbine rifle that was the store owner kept for protection. As officers arrived, the suspect opened fire from inside the store, striking Officer Keller. Officers returned fire, wounding the suspect several times. Torrance SWAT team arrived and made entry into the store and found the suspect dead from a self-inflicted gunshot. Officer Keller succumbed to his injuries at the scene. Officer Keller was hired by the Torrance Police Department on April 26, 1982. He had previously served with the United States Marine Corps and as a reserve deputy and Explorer Scout with the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. I'd also like to share with you a letter from one of our citizens upon hearing of Officer Keller's passing. He wrote, in part, "The year 1986 will indeed live in infamy for my family in so many levels. My family had lived in turmoil due to problems with a wayward child. At a loss of what to do because nothing seemed to be working with the child, I called the Torrance Police Department, threw my arms up in the air, and pled for help. Among the officers who responded to our plea was Officer Keller. He was attentive and made every effort to understand. There were other occasions when we called Torrance Police in reference to our child, and on occasion, it would be Officer Thomas Keller. So we got to know him a little. One day, I was sitting deep in thought about our kid when I heard a knock at my door, and there stood Officer Keller. I hadn't called him, but there he was. He said that he had been thinking about me and was wondering how things were. We talked for a while as I filled him in, and he said he would stay in touch, and he left. Well, he couldn't stay in touch because 2 days later, he was shot and killed. Officer Keller's kindness and at a truly rough time for our family will never be forgotten. This old Marine knows a good man when he sees one. Is kind and few and far between, and will be greatly missed. Semper Fi, Officer Keller, and thanks, Jim Davis." Officer Keller was buried on April 23, 1986, at Calvary Cemetery in Goleta, California. Officer Thomas Keller, you'll never be forgotten.